Hello, everyone. It's Natalie here, and today I'm covering this topic that is very important, and it's about shame. And as parents, often it happens that we unconsciously shame our kids, and um, and there are ways to learn how to not shame our children. And by the way, we all have done it. I've done it, and I know you must have experienced shame, or you've shamed somebody at times. It's something that we've all done as human beings. And shame is an emotion, just like any other emotion. However, it is also one of those lowest feeling emotion we can experience as a human being. And today, my intention is not to shame you. It's never my intention, but sharing some information with you that may help you understand what shame is and how we unconsciously shame our children or other people, and how we can work to address that so we don't shame our children when we don't want to shame them, because I truly believe that it's never our intention to shame our children, but it's happening anyways. And so today it's about how can we be more conscious when we are actually going into that shaming mode, or when we are also experiencing shame ourselves, what can we do about it? So, first of all, I'm going to ask you to remember, a time when perhaps you were called a bad girl or a bad boy for doing something that was not acceptable to another person or another adult, right? I was raised and I've been told that I should not attract attention because good girls don't attract attention to themselves. And otherwise, I'll be considered a bad girl. And that's shame. That's a message that I got from very young, at a very young age, that in order to be a good girl, I should not attract any attention to myself, right? It's already giving me that message. I need to hide in order to be a good girl. So can you recall for you when you heard this expression, you're a bad girl or you're a bad boy if you do this or this, right? And often criticism is what leads to that feeling of shame when we're being criticized, when we're being told we're too sensitive, we're too lazy, we're stupid for doing this, we're too fat, we're too thin, we're too slow. All of that is giving us that message that there's something wrong with us. Because if I ask you, how does that feel when you're being told you're too this, you're too that? Right? Most of the time it's hurtful and it's painful. So the habit, and it is a habit, of shaming is learned and passed down. As a child, most likely, if I ask you, have you experienced shame as a child? 99% of us will say yes, right? And as we grew up, if I ask you, have you ever shamed yourself? And also, I would say 99% of people would say yes. We've all shamed ourselves at some point. And we do that for a reason that I will touch upon a little bit later. And if I ask you, have you ever shamed somebody else? Intentionally or unintentionally? And that answer also, for most of us, will be yes. So like I said at the beginning of this talk, is that my intention with sharing this information with you is not to shame you. That's the least thing that I want to do, because I strongly believe that 99% of parents want their best for their children. You want the best for your children, and you're raising your children to the best ability that you have today. Right? And so that's the truth. So having said that, now I'm going to delve into the ways we usually shame our children. And again, most of the time it can be unconscious. We're not aware of it, that what we're doing is actually shaming. So some very common phrases we use as parents, and we use them again because we've learned it. We've heard those phrases when we were growing up, actually. And that's why we are unconsciously doing this, because we are just repeating what we've experienced or learned as a child. So often we hear parents say, you are the reason that our finances is so bad. You're the reason why we're fighting so much. You're the reason why our house is in a mess all the time. You're the reason why your siblings, always reacting to you. So whenever you say you're the reason, that's directly pointing to the child and saying, you're the cause. You're causing this. Or another one is, we spend so much time, so much money, so much energy on you, and still blah, blah, blah. And yet another one is, why can't you just get it? Why can't you just remember the things I told you? Why can't you just remember to do the things right? Why can't you just be like your sibling? Why can't you act your age? Right? And all these phrases are ways that we are starting to shame a child. And this is not our intention. I get it. I've used these phrases myself. I mean, the intention was never to shame them, but we wanted the best for them. We wanted them to change their behavior for their own good, but we did it by using these phrases. We can also shame with our facial expressions. The way we look at our children can already give them that sense that who they are is bad. They can feel it just by looking at us, at our facial expressions, by hearing our tone of voice, the way we're speaking to them. If they did something that was not acceptable to us, our tone of voice usually will change, and that change in tone of voice gives them the message that they're not doing something right, and therefore their whole being is seen as not right. And that's what shame does. It literally just gives them that signal there's something wrong with them, right? And this week I've worked with a few people who told me the same thing. I felt like I'm wrong. I don't matter. And this is a result of how we were talked to, the things, the words that we heard, and the way we felt disconnected from our caregivers and parents. Another one is ignoring our child, not making eye contact. And they say that babies as young as 9 months old, a baby of that age can experience shame just by a parent or caregiver breaking eye contact. And a baby does not have language but can feel shame. And same thing with an animal, a dog, when we're yelling at them or saying bad, whatever it is, they also feel that shame in that moment. And you'll often see your dog go in a corner and just sit there quietly. So this is how we, as parents, unconsciously shame our children. And until we address our own shame that we experience as children, it is very hard not to shame our kids. If we have shame, we are going to shame others. And that's the truth. So therefore, as parents, we need to learn how to address our own shame in order not to repeat the same cycle over and over again. Not that you're not going to shame. It can happen again, even when you work on yourself, but to reduce the amount of shaming is going to be key for how your child is going to grow up with self-confidence and self-esteem, because the more shame, the less confident the child is going to be. So we shame because we've learned that shaming is what will make our child change their behaviors. That's a belief that's out there when it comes to shaming. If I just tell you that you're too slow and you need to get quicker, perhaps, you're going to get it, and then you'll pick up momentum and do things quicker, and that's going to help you later on. I'm guilty of that. I've used that phrase before, but know that, yes, it's going to work. And you know why? Because when we shame a child, when we're saying you're too this, you're too that, what it threatens is the attachment needs of the child is being threatened. And I've done a lot of other training on a child's attachment needs and how misbehaviors are an indication of the needs that are not being met, the attachment needs. So when we shame a child, unconsciously or consciously, they feel threatened because they feel that disconnection with us. And when there's a disconnection with us, the survival is threatened. And then they go into interpreting this as, I am not worthy of my attachment needs to be met. There's an expression out there that says children are great intuitors. They can feel everything. But also they are bad interpreters. The way they interpret things is not usually proper. It's not right. And that's because a child's brain hasn't fully developed. And it's not fully developed until they are in their mid-20s. So when a child is young, how a child interprets when they're being shamed and they feel threatened that their attachment needs are not going to met, because what do we do when we shame? We disconnect from the child. We get angry at the child. We separate from the child. And the child is like, oh my gosh, now I don't know if I'm going to be loved. I don't feel loved, actually. When you're angry at me and you're criticizing me, I'm not loved. I don't feel loved. And that literally the child will question their worthiness. And that's what happens. And over time, if we keep criticizing and we keep shaming, then that's when the belief of I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable starts to become more and more and more solidified for a child. And then we grow up as adults with this belief. We all have that belief to a certain degree that we're not enough. And why is that? It's because of the shame we've experienced. Some of us experience shame to a much greater degree than others, but nonetheless, we can't prevent shame completely. So there's been a certain amount of shaming that we've experienced as a child, then that brings up that belief, that form the belief that we're not enough, we're not worthy, we're not lovable. So when that happens, the child says, because I am bad, I am alone, right? And that's why a lot of adults feel lonely as an adult, because of the base of it is that I'm bad. And that's why I am alone. And that's a very deep, deep belief. So when a child starts to believe that she has to do something to restore that connection so their needs can be met, right? The child will use many coping mechanisms, and that we as adults can see it in ourselves today. Either we're going to want to please others, we become people pleasers. We feel like we need to keep the peace in the family by staying quiet, by not saying anything, by not challenging others. We hide, we try to fit in, we try to fix others, right? In the family, we want to be perfect, perfectionism, so that we can belong. And then when we feel like we belong, we are no longer lonely, we feel part of the family, then we feel loved, we feel cared for, we feel seen, heard, and validated. And that restores the safety for the child. To know that, it starts like our coping mechanism as adults starts in childhood. And we learn how to cope by coming up with these survival mechanisms. And today as adults, often we are questioning, why am I a people pleaser? Why do I try to fit in even if I don't like it? Why do I feel like I have to do everything perfectly before I can share my work with others? Right? And so all of that stems from the shame we have experienced as children ourselves. And like I mentioned, shame is the lowest vibration of all emotion. And what is shame saying? Is it saying we are seeing ourselves as bad? We are bad. And often we criticize others as bad And that's how we also shame others. So when we feel shame, we are also shaming. It's in us. One doesn't happen without the other. And so therefore, all of us who've experienced shame and still have shame, we have a tendency to shame others as well. Not that we intentionally want to do it, but it's, like I mentioned, it's a habit that we've learned. So when that happens, it disconnects us from who we are and from humanity as a whole. We tend to isolate ourselves with fear when we feel shame, because there's that strong fear that we're going to be rejected and abandoned when we experience shame. So the core belief of shame is that we are hiding. What we are hiding is so dreadful that if anyone found that out about ourselves, we would be rejected and banished from humanity, right? If, for instance, if I have shame as a parent, if anybody knows how I am as a parent, then they're going to reject me. They may criticize me, they may judge me, which then causes more shame for me, which becomes unbearable. So therefore, I have to hide. I have to pretend I'm a good parent by, doing this or that, or making sure that my children are always excelling at school or at sports, whatever it is that we do to cover the shame that we are experiencing deep down, right? And what's happening physiologically when we feel shame is our parasympathetic system of our autonomic system, which usually gets activated when we don't feel safe. We go into fight, flight, freeze mode. Usually it gets activated, that sympathetic system. It's the sympathetic systems that goes into fight, fight, freeze mode. But this is not what gets overactivated. It's actually the other part of us, the parasympathetic system, that get overactivated. We literally want to conserve energy when we're frightened, when we feel shame. And our mind thinks that we need to conserve the energy right now because it really threatens our survival needs. So we usually, look down, we don't make eye contact, we don't look at anybody when our body feels like the shame. That's how our body posture shows the shame. We want to hide, right? So we don't have shame without shaming. That's the truth. And we can't give our children what we don't have. We can't stop shaming our kids and others without learning how to stop shaming ourselves in the first place. And the good news is that shame can be repaired. The shame we've experienced, even as a child ourselves, can be repaired. It's not for good. So I'm going to delve right away into the 4 ways to work with shame. And what I'm going to share to you is based on Brené Brown's work. Brené Brown is an expert who has done a lot of research on shame. And here it goes. The first one is to know what triggers you as a parent that brings up shame for you. Example, for me, being a good parent. If I feel that I'm not a good parent, that brings up shame for me. It could be what others are saying about you as a person, as a whole, as a mother, as a sister, as a daughter, whatever it is, or whatever role that you're in. It may be your looks, how you look brings up shame if you don't look a certain way. Or your children's behaviors brings up shame when our children are misbehaving. A lot of us, we feel the shame, right? So knowing what triggers you, because there's something called the emotion trigger loop, and that's something that I work with my clients to help them to see what are the triggers that brings up the emotion for you. So what are the things that bring up shame for you? And I can guarantee you there are just a few list of things that brings up intense shame for you. So knowing what are those things will then help you to inquire into why is that? Why is it when somebody is questioning my parenting, for example, it brings up shame? What is that saying about me? So that will go right into number 2, is being able to do a reality check when we're feeling the shame. So for example, when our kids are misbehaving, we react with yelling, criticizing, punishing, and that is happening because we're feeling a lot of shame when they're misbehaving. So then doing this reality check will look like this. Asking yourself is, are my child's behavior saying that I'm failing at parenting? And therefore, maybe it's reflecting that I am a bad parent. And when I'm a bad parent, I feel unworthy. I feel not enough. I feel unlovable. Right? So asking yourself that question, are my child's behaviors saying that I'm failing at parenting? Is that true? Is that 100% true? Or it could be, are these behaviors perhaps are bringing my attention to their needs that I need to address? Right? That's another way to look at it. So what is the truth here? Are their misbehaviors saying that I'm a bad parent? Or are their misbehaviors telling me that I need to address their needs that they are feeling are not being met in the moment? Which one feels is true? Which one is the truth here? So that's how we do the reality check, right? Is this or is this that? Another way is to, shame is we want to hide, right? So what's the opposite of that? Instead of hiding, it's sharing your feeling with someone that you can trust and someone who can help you release the shame. And when you can do that, then you can practice and the reality checks will get easier and easier for you to do. That's number 2, doing the reality checks. When we can share what is feeling shameful for us with somebody that understands us and that we can trust in and help us move that shame out of our body, because just like any emotion, the shame is in our bodies, it's living in our tissues. That's why they come up when something is triggering to us. And learning how to move that emotion is going to help you then question where that shame is coming from. And is it true? When I feel shame, what I'm thinking or perceiving, is that true or not? Right, and the last one is not the last one, but what you can do for yourself as a parent is share your stories with others. And that's what I'm doing here, because I've experienced a lot of shame growing up. And From experiencing shame, I definitely developed the belief that I'm not good enough. And I became a perfectionist. I actually I was addicted to exercise. I used exercise to reclaim my worth in a way. But then it became a destructive pattern that I had to learn how to control. And that's my story. I learned how to manage the destructive addiction with yoga. And and yeah, like, but this is started like way back when for me. And so I also had a lot of shame as a parent, not being a good enough parent. And I still have some of that in me. But nonetheless, I'm here sharing this with you, and so that you know that instead of judging or criticizing ourselves and other parents, how can we learn together as parents and share our own vulnerability? Because I'm pretty sure that how I feel a lot of times is similar to how you feel as a parent. And we all experience these imperfect moments with our children. We've all felt shame and we've all shamed our children. But when we talk about it and we can share, then that shame can no longer imprison us. When we can have an honest discussion about it to help each other, then we can have a better understanding where all of that is coming from and what we can do today to minimize the amount of shaming we do with our children, or if we've done some form of shaming, when we have realized it, doing the repair work with our kids, letting them know it's not that they are bad. It's the behavior they engaged in that was bad, and to apologize if we've done the shaming and be honest about it. So how can we help our children? Can we minimize the amount of shaming and stop shaming our kids? Is often the language we're using. That's problematic, right? It's something we've learned and we need to unlearn the way we use language, right? I shared this post the other day about we often hear parents, and we may have used it ourselves, that we tell our kids, you should be ashamed of yourself. And that literally targets their self. That word, yourself. It's saying, you are bad. You, yourself is bad. Which is not our intention. Because often it's because, say our kids are climbing up on the table and we don't want them to climb on the table because it's dangerous. Then it's not them climbing, that's bad. It's climbing on the table. Instead, we can suggest, you want to climb? Let's go outside. Let's find a tree. You can climb on the tree. You can climb on the playground structure, for instance. That's where you're meant to explore your climbing abilities. But when we get angry and we are saying, you should be ashamed of yourself, you're climbing up, you shouldn't be doing this, you should know better, then that targets them directly. And there's no room for improvement when we say that. But when we say this behavior is what's the problem, then there's room to change the behavior. We can change behaviors. but we can't change who we truly are. And that's what we're doing when we're shaming. We are saying who you truly are is bad. So making sure when we are triggered by a misbehavior that we use the language that says that it's the behavior that's not right, not the child as a whole. And last is, as our role as a parent, we are meant to reflect to our children their worthiness. That's our role, to let them know that they're good enough, that they are worthy, that they are confident, that they're intelligent, that they are lovable. We are meant to reflect that truth to them. But when we criticize and we shame, we're saying the opposite. And what they're going to learn is what we're saying. So if we're not reflecting their true essence, their wholeness, we are reflecting criticism, and that's what they're going to absorb and take as truth for them. Then they grow up believing, I'm not enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not confident enough. I can't do this because of who I am. And I know you and I don't want to give that message to our children. Instead, we want to give them the message that they are enough, lovable, that they do matter, that they can do whatever they want to do in this lifetime, whatever they want to explore, create. That's their true essence and power. So on that note, thank you for listening to this training, and hopefully it sheds some light on how to stop that cycle of shame and shaming. And it starts with us as parents. And if you want to learn more about how to do this work to address your own shame in order to help your children, then feel free to reach out to me, and I can share with you the kind of work that I do, especially with my emotion control method, and how we can address the shame that you've experienced, and how you can map out your own emotion trigger loop when it comes to shame, and how you can do those reality checks when you feel shame or when you're about to shame somebody. And then how to establish new habits, new ways of using language in a way that will help ourselves and also help our children. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or you want to know more about my program. Take care, everyone, and have a good day, evening, or afternoon. Talk to you soon.